Hello and welcome to Bridging the Gap. I'm your host, Ty Johnson, and today we have a very special guest with us, none other than Dr. Patrick Oates. Dr. Oates, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. Thank you
For
very
our
much.
viewership who may not know your story, I just want to delve right into your personal story first because I think it's a remarkable one. You're a product of the school district of Philadelphia. You grew up, born and raised here in Philadelphia.
That's right.
Where did you go to high school?
High school, I attended W.B. Saul High School in Roxborough.
And then you went on to undergrad.
Did my undergraduate work at Tuskegee University in Tuskegee, Alabama, and majored in animal science. And from there, I pursued a PhD in molecular biology and physiology at Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Well, I can't even spell molecular biology, but that sounds fascinating. So, to our viewing audience, what does a molecular biologist do, and what type of courses did you take along the way to prepare you for the person you've become today?
Well, I've always had a very strong interest in science that was nurtured, Reverend Johnson, by my experience in the Philadelphia public school system. Back in sixth grade, it's what I remember most about a science instructor, a teacher I had by the name of Mrs. Morgan at Marcy Leeds Middle School. And Mrs. Morgan was the first person that, in a sense, gave me an idea that I was good in science. And then from there, I had another professor or teacher at that time at Leeds by the name of Mr. Metz, later became Dr. Metz. And this man had an uncanny way of delivering science to students back then. And I was intrigued by that. So that's when I first started to become interested in science and really thought that I was good at it. And then the result of that led to my experience at W.B. Saul High School, and then later to pursue a degree in animal science at Tuskegee, where I met a professor who was a physiologist, an animal physiologist. Dr. Noble was his name, Ralph Noble. And he encouraged me to pursue a PhD in physiology and molecular biology. And as a result of that experience, I later was afforded the opportunity to work in research and development at the National Institutes of Health and later GlaxoSmithKline Pharmaceutical Company.
Okay, let's rewind the tape for a moment. After Saul, after Tuskegee, you go off to pursue a PhD. At that point, did you know exactly what you wanted to do in the field of science, or were you still kind of navigating your way?
I did know what I wanted to do because at Howard University, I was given the chance to work in the summer of my first and second year in grad school at a SmithKline research and development facility in Upper Marion, Pennsylvania. And so as a result of that experience, I knew that I wanted to work in the pharmaceutical industry. And so before completing my PhD at Howard, I began to reconnect with some of my old colleagues at SmithKline, and they made it possible for me to assume a full-time role in pharmaceuticals.
Now, I know some of your work has been in the medical field. Could you kind of give us a detailed history of what type of work you've done and what type of target community that you've worked with in the medical field? Because if I recall, you did some major research in the field of diabetes, is that correct?
Well, my interest was in diabetes, and I pursued the PhD, and my dissertation research was in insulin resistance diabetes. And so after completing my PhD at Howard, I did some work at SmithKline in diabetes. But by that time, I was no longer in the lab. I had moved on from lab work and really began to look at opportunities in medical affairs at SmithKline. And therefore, we had a major drug at the time for diabetes, and I was responsible for doing some of the medical education around this drug that was a major blockbuster for SmithKline Pharmaceutical Company.
Now, the diabetes community, I know it affects my home. I'm borderline diabetic. My mother, she was a diabetic. My father, he was a diabetic. Diabetes seems to me to be a killer disease. It affects a lot of African Americans. Do you know why that is, or is there?
Well, there are a number of reasons, Reverend Johnson. One, because of, um, of lifestyle. Diabetes has a direct correlation with obesity, and because of our community, because um, the fact that the the diets aren't what they should be, people are increasing in weight and body mass index at an extraordinary rate beyond years past. People aren't exercising quite like they did years ago. And then there is a familial component, meaning that it's can be hereditary.
Okay.
And so diabetes is not only in your family, but it's also in mine. My father was a diabetic, my grandfather, and my great grandmother was a diabetic.
Wow.
So diabetes is prevalent in certainly in the African American race as well as Native American race. But what's the most important is the need to begin to look at changing one's lifestyle, exercising more, watching their intake, one's intake of high carbohydrate foods. Those are some of the, if you will, the remedies to meet the needs of those who are stricken with the disease, diabetes.
Now, that disease being as awful as it is, I read the newspaper and listen to the radio and watch the news, and occasionally I will see that diabetes affects a lot of children and adolescents. Is that a new phenomenon, or has that always been?
Well, I mean, you have two different kinds of diabetes. You have type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 would typically be seen in juveniles. But now we're seeing type 2 diabetes in people under 21 years of age.
Wow.
And that's because young men and women aren't going out and playing like you and I did years ago. Young men and women aren't conscious of their diet, or their parents aren't conscious of the need to serve healthy foods. And young people aren't making healthy food choices. And so you see an increase in diabetes amongst young men and women because of the increase in body mass index.
Now, what does diabetes, what can, if it goes unchecked, what can it lead to? Because I've heard some horror stories, and I have some in my own family.
Diabetes is a syndrome that could lead to everything from diabetic neuropathy to diabetic retinopathy to kidney failure. It could lead to heart disease. There are a number of serious disorders that result from unchecked diabetes and long-term unchecked diabetes.
Loss of limbs.
Loss of limbs, right,
Yeah.
as a result of just long-standing untreated diabetes.
Now, early in your career, as you were doing research in this area and providing medical awareness to people who were affected by that disease, was it your passion, or was it because it was in your family and you wanted to combat that dreadful disease? How did you get started, of all the fields of medicine that you could have chose to work in? What was it that led you early in your career to the field of diabetes?
I think ultimately it probably was the fact that my family was stricken with the disease, and because I attended Howard University, a great deal of work was being done at that time at Howard in the disease area.
Well, that's exciting to know that anyone who's viewing this program, young man or woman, regardless of their race, people tend to knock down the School District of Philadelphia, but you are a product of the School District of Philadelphia.
I certainly am, a proud graduate.
And proud. Now, having said that, diabetes, we know, affects many communities, and we know that it's a dreadful disease. Are we starting to see the trend turn? Are people starting to live a more active lifestyle as opposed to sedentary lifestyles? Or are we starting to see changes in that field? Are less people being stricken with diabetes? Have there been some inroads made in the communities in which you once served, or is it pretty much?
No, I think there's certainly been inroads in education, better education. I mean, clinical researchers know much more today than they ever have. There are many more products available by way of pharmaceutical companies than have ever been before. People are living longer with diabetes, and that's a result of billions and billions of research dollars. And the NIH has a huge focus on diabetes through the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disorders.
Wow. Because I think of all the disorders that come as a result of diabetes, and I'm sure you can tell us some stories that would make our hair stand up. And then I'm sure you can tell us some success stories, but I just want to encourage you to keep doing the work that you're doing, but I'm going to also come back on the other end of, after we pay some bills, I'm going to come back and I want to talk to you about what you've done since then and what you're currently doing, because I think you have a story that needs to be heard.
Great.
So again, don't go anywhere. You stay right where you are. Stay tuned. We'll be back very, very shortly with our guest, Dr. Patrick Oates. Don't you leave.
In LaSalle University's Communication Department, students learn to think and do.
Every semester, communication students create and implement public relations plans for local nonprofit organizations.
And journalism students produce Germantown Beat, an online news source for the local community.
It's great that we can apply what we learn in the classroom in our community.
Philadelphia is the nation's 4th largest media market and has 4 major sports teams.
Being in a major media market allows us to gain great professional experience through internships and co-ops.
The Communication Center is home to the university's cable station.
LaSalle TV reaches over 350,000 homes in Philadelphia and airs mostly student-produced programming.
Our communication department is ranked in the top 10 in North America for relational communication research.
But keeping with the tradition of the De La Salle Christian Brothers, teaching students comes first.
Think, do with LaSalle Communication. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter.
Hello and welcome back to Bridging the Gap. Our guest today is none other than Dr. Patrick Oates. Now, Dr. Oates, on this side, I wanted to kind of bring us up to snuff on what you're doing now. After you did the research, medical research in diabetes, where did your career take you after that?
Well, as I said, I continued to do some work in pharmaceuticals. I worked in actually pharmaceuticals for about the next 13 years at a number of companies, from GlaxoSmithKline to Sanofi Aventis to Wyeth Pharmaceutical Company. And then I pursued an opportunity with a local minority pharmaceutical interest called Cherokee Pharmaceuticals, which is a division of a company called PRWT Services, one of the major African-American owned companies here in Philadelphia. We acquired a Merck pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in Riverside, Pennsylvania. And I did some work there for about 2 years with Cherokee Pharmaceutical Company. And then later that company was acquired, reacquired, if you will, by Merck Pharmaceutical Company. And so I did some work, Reverend Johnson, still in the pharmaceutical space with a number of startup companies, really trying to gain a better understanding of how a drug is developed from preclinical to clinical and ultimately marketed. And so I began to develop core competencies in drug development and enhance my understanding of the drug development process. But really felt like I wanted to do more than just pharmaceuticals. I was really looking at doing some teaching on the college level. I was offered a chance to do some teaching at Pierce College, where I taught anatomy and physiology and pathophysiology. And then one teaching opportunity led to another. I did some work at Penn State Abington campus. I taught anatomy and physiology there, and taught a course at University of Pennsylvania in antimicrobial pharmacology. Did some work there, and did and recently still doing some work at Pierce College in pathophysiology. But most recently, Reverend Johnson, I had the chance to join a local company called Universal Companies as the vice president for science education.
Wow. Now, is that a charter school?
Well, Universal is a charter school system. Universal Companies is the parent company, and within Universal Companies is an educational division, of which Universal owns 10 charter schools.
Wow.
8 in Philadelphia and 2 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so we have about somewhere close to 6,000 students, or scholars we call them, that we are responsible for within our system. So obviously we're larger than some school systems across the country, a number of school systems.
Do you teach? What is your capacity in that realm?
I'm an administrator responsible for enhancing the science curriculum, for connecting our scholars to opportunities with science-based institutions here in Philadelphia that I serve, like the Philadelphia Zoo. I've served on the board of the Philadelphia Zoo for the last 3 or 4 years. I serve on the board of the Academy of Natural Sciences, and my goal is to link the organization to that organization. The Free Library of Philadelphia, I do some work with the Free Library as a trustee, and then I do some work with the Wistar Research Institute, Cancer Research Institute. So my goal really is to help to enhance the science education for these young men and women that attend the Universal Schools in Philadelphia.
Now, is that markedly different from how you first started out in your field?
It's different in the sense that I'm no longer in pharmaceuticals, but now instead of I guess advancing my own agenda with regard to science, I'm helping to advance the agenda of young men and women and help to spark an interest in science and enhance their experience in science. Needless to say, I mean, we as a city are woefully behind a number of other cities across the country, but yet we as a nation are lagging behind with regard to science proficiency than other nations.
Yeah, I've read studies that Japan, China,
Singapore, countries like that are light years ahead of us.
Why is that?
Well, because they've taken a serious look at science and educating young men and women in STEM. We call it STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so, as I said, we have begun, I mean, in this nation, we've recognized it. President Obama has recognized the need for us as a nation to pursue STEM opportunities and to enhance STEM education. So now we're seeing a greater focus, a greater investment in STEM education. And so that's the role that I play now with Universal Companies.
I'm 15 years old. I just happen to be watching this program, and I'm thinking, maybe I can have a career in science. I'm in the 10th grade. I don't have a great proficiency, but I have a great interest in it. What do you suggest to that young person?
I suggest that young man or woman really sit down and really try to understand science and really what it's all about. I mean, when I think of science, I think of not only the clothes you wear, I think about the air you breathe, I think about the food you eat. All of that is science. the plastic container that you drink water out of, the process of even accessing that water and putting it on in the bottle. That's all science. And so most men and women or young people, when they think of science, they only think of molecular biology and DNA and RNA and chemistry and organic chemistry, physical chemistry. No, science is that, but it's so much more than that. And in a way, I think it's extremely important that all of us be science literate. Not only literate as it pertains to the ability to read, but have a keen interest in science.
Wow.
Yeah, not just, thinking about science like, oh, I want to major in chemistry, I want to be a biologist. No, all of us should have an appreciation for science.
Now, the school where you work as an administrator, I would assume that they have a keen interest because of your presence in making sure that their students have a good foundation in the sciences. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Universal Companies is the brainchild of Kenny Gamble and Fatima Gamble.
Right.
And the president of the company is Mr. Raheem Islam. And so Raheem Islam recruited Dr. Penny Nixon as the former chief academic officer from the school district, recruited her to provide leadership to the education division at Universal. And so as a result of that, Dr. Nixon asked me to come on board and to lead the science effort. So very happy about what I'm doing now. I feel like I'm making an impact, and I feel like I'm really enhancing the life of someone else other than my own.
The old days of, I know when I was growing up, they were always very popular. They had science fairs. Is that still something that's amenable to today's student, or is that something that's passé?
It certainly is. Science fairs are absolutely critical. I mean, because science fairs allow students to develop a very significant practical experience in science. We've got to teach our young men and women to get their hands dirty again, all right? Not just, young men and women typically of today don't learn like we learned. A teacher at the front of the board, at the front of the class, writing on a board, and we taking notes.
Right.
That does not intrigue students today.
Wow.
Students want to get their hands dirty, they want to experience it, they want to go on online, they want to see it. That's how students learn today. And so we got to meet students where they are. We've got to be able to deliver information, science, chemistry, biology, environmental science, whatever it may be, deliver it to them in a way that's palatable to them.
Now, that STEM that you spoke of, the science, technology, engineering, and math.
That's right.
Those STEM related fields, sometimes students may feel as though, well, I'm not really good in chemistry or biology, so they may feel a little intimidated about pursuing a career in a science field. What do you say to that person? Is there somewhere they can go to get extra help, or is there somewhere they can go where somebody will sit down and kind of work through that with them?
There are all kinds of resources available to young men and women who have an interest in science. So I would encourage any young man or woman not to be intimidated. I wasn't a perfect student of science. I didn't do well in chemistry.
Okay.
All right, and I think it was primarily because I didn't have a good instructor.
Okay.
All right, and I was intimidated. I was scared of the subject. But now that I'm older, I see, I see how chemistry is certainly something that I find interest in now. But I haven't always. But didn't do well in chemistry, but I didn't let that intimidate me from pursuing my dreams in science.
Well, you certainly are, I can say, an inspiration to a lot of young people coming up in your school, I'm sure, as well as students and scholars that you might meet abroad who, if they don't want to go into science, they still would like to make something of their lives. And I certainly applaud the work that you're doing and have done. But I have one last question. I know you have a wife, beautiful wife and children. Your son or daughter, are they future scientists, budding scientists?
Well, I like to think they are. I like to think they are. I make every effort to take them to the Academy of Natural Science, to take them to the zoo, the Philadelphia Zoo. Every city I visit, I make sure that they that they have that experience at every city. I don't know if they will pursue science in the way that I did, but what I think is most important, that they are science literate. All right, they may not pursue a PhD or an MD or an MD PhD, but certainly I'd like them to be science literate, or citizens. I like to call citizens of science.
Okay. Well,
and I'd like you to be a citizen of science.
I have a joke. I don't know if Tanya would give me enough time. She'd probably kill me afterwards, but I have a joke about the zoo, but I'll forego that for now because I don't want Tanya to kill me. She's a real hard taskmaster, and I'm afraid of her too. So
okay,
yes,
okay,
I'm vividly afraid of her. But again, I appreciate you sharing and coming and being with us and allowing us to kind of peek behind the curtain, because not every day does someone get an opportunity to talk to someone like yourself who is a scientist, and to pick your brain and to listen to your passion and to hear your concern about the direction this country is going in as it relates to the fields of science and medicine and engineering, technology, and so forth. So I really want you to know how appreciative I am, and I'm sure my audience is, that you took the time out to come and share with us, and we get it, as it were, straight from the horse's mouth, you know.
Well, thank you, Reverend Johnson, for giving me this opportunity. I'm blessed, and knowing that I'm blessed, I think it's incumbent upon me to share my blessings with others. So thank you.
Thank you. Again, when one's on the right and another's on the left, when we reach towards the middle, we begin to bridge the gap. Until next time, love somebody and be nice to everybody. Bye for now.